Hello, everyone, and welcome to another special edition of Superhero Pantheon Limited Edition. We are keeping up with our theme of reviewing recent television seasons. Last week we discussed Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This week we are going to be discussing Amazon Prime's animated television show Invincible. This is a show that, of course, is executive produced by Robert Kirkman, who is also known for The Walking Dead, but it also has executive producers like Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. So there are a lot of big names attached to this voice-wise, which I'll get to in a minute. As always, if you would like to get in contact with us, please do so through our Twitter at Hero Pantheon. In addition to that, make sure that you leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anything of that sort, so you can find out what else is going on here on the Real World Network. There will be movies. The 90s edition will be returning very soon. Just this week, in fact, as you are listening to this right now, Kevin Ford and I have just completed our review of *Halt and Catch Fire*. You should be able to listen to our thoughts on the fourth and final season of that specific show right now. One of the longest podcasts that's ever been done on the network. So make sure that you go ahead and do that and take care of that. My co-host, of course, is Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. And Brian, all I could say is this is a show that I wasn't sure about it because Amazon, of course, has The Boys, and The Boys, in kind of a similar vein, has some stand-ins for different characters and is clearly providing kind of an alternative point of view on superherodom, just as this show is doing. But unlike The Boys, the show, of course, is animated. It has a powerhouse a powerhouse voice cast that, like I said, I will read off in short order. But Brian, this is a show that I really came to enjoy on a weekly basis, and I really found myself getting into the storytelling elements a lot more than Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And we could talk about the animation style, we could talk about likes and dislikes, but just my overall thoughts, I really, really like this show. And there are certain things that I don't think work totally, but I found myself at the end of the eighth episode very satisfied with what I saw and was really interested to see what they put forth in future seasons. This was just announced on April the 29th, but there will be seasons 2 and 3 of this show as well. So clearly it is doing well enough for Amazon to justify 2 more seasons, and that is also very exciting to me. But yeah, I was found myself very satisfied with this show overall. And Brian, I'll let you speak a little bit on your thoughts on Invincible.
I did the binge watching gimmick, and I actually just watched the episode yesterday, the last episode. So I binge watched like 2 or 3 days beforehand, so I got really into it, and I enjoyed the characters a lot. Some of the story a little iffy because sometimes they kind of drop some stuff and then they'll kind of come back to it, and then some characters kind of just disappear. But I enjoyed like a lot of what they were going for. I enjoyed more of like the sci-fi elements of this. I think that's what drew me in more. Like I was more attracted to like the robot character than I was probably Invincible. But I think that's just more of what I'm into because like they were doing some really crazy Doctor Who type stuff with the robot character and the alien invasion stuff that was just kind of like some side stuff to the main storyline of like Omni Man. Spoiler alert, we're gonna give spoilers on here. Sorry, but Omni Man is the actual villain of the show, and based on the big twist at the beginning of the first or at the end of the first episode, it kind of turns it on its ear. So, spoiler alert, like, Omni Man kills the Guardians, and the Guardians are like the protectors of Earth, blah, blah, blah. The Justice League, the Avengers, whatever, what have you. And why? Why does he do it? By the end of the season, we actually don't. I mean, I guess he's like a conqueror and he wants to weaken Earth, and that's why he killed him, but I don't know. It just kind of like they stretch that reasoning out. But I do like that they revealed it in the beginning because it creates this tension, and I think he did that on purpose. It's very like a Hitchcock thing to do. Like I've said this example before, but like if you have a scene with people talking and eating breakfast, it's boring as hell. And this is what Hitchcock says. But if you tell the audience that there's a bomb that's going to go off at a certain time during the conversation, everything intensifies and everything becomes like tension. You know what I mean? And letting the audience know about that he's the bad guy and everyone else not knowing creates that tension that's really like that was really good in the first couple episodes until it kind of broke that and kind of revealed everything. But those first couple episodes with like the dramatic tension from like Sandra Oh as the wife and the son and kind of like hiding all that stuff, that was really good. That was really good stuff right there. Some of the stuff I didn't really like is kind of like the treatment of some of the characters. Um, as like I mentioned, like in the opening, like he kills the Guardians, right? And the character of Omni Man, played by, well, we'll go over the cast list later, but Omni Man pretty much does like a hate crime. It feels like at the begin at the end of the episode when he's killing the Guardians, and the way it looks, because like a lot of the characters that were voiced by the Guardians are minorities, and the way it just kind of felt, I felt like I was watching a hate crime. But that's kind of what it was supposed to be, because by the end they reveal that he's like a supremacist, basically, not a white supremacist, but like a supremacist in that even in his home world, in Ventronium or whatever it's called, but in his home world, they killed half the planet that they felt was weak, and then they went to conquer all the other planets around them, and that's how he ended up on Earth. But like just stuff like that was some crazy stuff that I wish they kind of when they do more. Like I felt like also they have a very diverse cast, but they never really talk about race at all in this show, which I was really disappointed with. I felt like they could have gone into that more with like a biracial family and all that stuff, but they didn't really do that. They went more with like the overall human, we're all humans kind of thing, and and then that's where like the whole supremacy thing comes in from Omni Man. So that's kind of my perspective on it. Like a lot of good character work on some of the side characters and a lot of good sci-fi stuff, but some of the main stuff I was just kind of questioning. And then the other thing too, I was really questioning like the way they treated some of the gay characters, because like his best friend's gay, and they go visit this school where he's visiting his boyfriend, right, his friend's boyfriend. But you can tell like they're gonna just by what they're doing in the episode, like they're gonna turn him into like some kind of monster, and they just tortured him and turned him into some kind of like Frankenstein monster. I was like, why did you do that to the gay character? So I don't know. It was just kind of weird that some of the way some of these characters were treated. But like I said, it does have highs and lows. But I think overall, there are probably more positives than negatives.
Brian, it's clear that I've worn off on you because that observation that you just made about the gay couple, I feel like that's an observation that I usually make when it comes to these superhero properties, but that is not something that I had thought of. But I think that's a really strong point that you make, and one that I had not considered.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but like I don't know, just the way that I saw the end of the first episode, I felt like okay, there's something going on here with race and stuff, but they didn't really go into it. And when I saw that, I was just like, man, you got the few gay characters on the show, and you just turned him into this robotic monster. It was just kind of weird, and I saw where it was going. That's why I think episode 6 is my least favorite, and that's even the one with Ezra Miller. And Ezra Miller is just playing this weird character that has like no background too. So, like I said, like there's some villain issues and some of the way some of these characters are treated, but I think some of the sci-fi stuff is really like well thought out.
I really like some of the character stuff, and I think that the only time that the show seems to deal with issues of race and class pretty directly is episode 5. And I think it's interesting that that's the only time they deal with it. And of course, that is the episode that most prominently features Shahala Ali as Titan. And it's fascinating that is the episode where it gets brought up. But I promised that I would read off the cast list just because it is pretty insane. If you want to know where the budget is, you don't see it. You definitely hear it though. You've got Stephen Yeun, who is an Academy Award nominee at this point, former cast member of The Walking Dead, as so many of these voice cast members are. So you've got Stephen Yeun in the lead role of Mark Grayson as Invincible. You've got Sandra Oh as Debbie Grayson. You've got J.K. Simmons as Nolan Grayson slash Omni-Man. Then you have the current members of the Guardians of the Globe, the ones who do not get viciously murdered. Zachary Quinto as the robot. Jillian Jacobs as Samantha Eve Wilkins slash Adam Eve. Jason Mantzoukas as Rex Splode. Other notable cast members from the original Guardians include Lauren Cohen from The Walking Dead as War Woman, Sonequa Martin Green as Alana slash Green Ghost. She has gone on to be a captain on Star Trek Discovery. Chad Coleman as Martian Man. I most know him from The Wire. You've got Lenny James as Darkwing. He is probably best known for his work on Fear the Walking Dead. Then you've got Walton Goggins as Cecil Stedman, who is part of the Global Defense Agency. He's basically like your Nick Shield kind of stand-in. You've got Seth Rogen as Alan the Alien, which what a perfect role for him. You've got Marshala Ali, of course. You've got Kevin Michael Richardson, who probably is not the most famous person, but he is somebody that has been in a ton of animated series and is somebody that I know pretty well. You've got Michael Dorn. You've got Ezra Miller. You've got another very pretty famous voiceover person in Fred Tassicator. Andrew Manelis as William Clockwell, Zazie Beetz as Amber, Mark Hamill as Art Rosenbaum, who does the costume designs, Nicole Byer, Clancy Brown, Mae Whitman. Yes, John Hamm is in the show, Sean Patrick Thomas, Jonathan Groff, Digimon Hansu, who we've talked about a million times, and you've even got Rick and Morty's Justin Roiland in this show in episode 5. He did a voiceover, very noticeable voiceover at the beginning of that episode. And last, but certainly not least, Brian, your favorite, Reginald Vell Johnson as Principal Winslow, the principal of Reginald Vell Johnson High School.
Yes, Family Matters. They did an obscure Family Matters reference, and it turns out that actually the finale's fight takes place in Chicago. So everything's kind of connected in the Chicago area, which Jerome is very familiar with. And it leads to me going on this little side rant here. But about 2 months ago, I made this like revelation that I guess by virtue of cameos on different like TV shows and stuff like that, the way they did like TGIF and stuff like that on ABC back in the 80s and 90s, like Urkel would appear on Step by Step, Urkel would appear on Full House, but then Family Matters started as like a backdoor to Perfect Strangers, right? So all these shows are actually connected, and I think it even extends to Hanging with Mr. Cooper. So if you want to go with it, Mr. Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Step by Step, Perfect Strangers, Family Matters, all those shows, Full House, they all take place in the Invincible universe, maybe, which I think is kind of awesome and random, but that's my sense of humor. So yeah, thank you for the random Family Matters reference in the show.
Absolutely. So I think that where we're going to start is by kind of talking about the first episode. And it's one of those things where I enjoyed the first episode. I kind of enjoyed some of the world building that was going on, the idea that Mark has not quite gotten his superpowers yet, and he is very clearly interested in his classmate, Amber Bennett. But then there comes a point when he does get his powers, and we see his father be a little bit aggressive toward him with a punch, and the credits start rolling. I'm like, okay, that was a solid first episode. I'm interested to see where this goes, this coming of age story. And then all the Guardians get called to the lair, and Brian, one of the most violent, vicious scenes that I have ever seen in media takes place. I mean, this basically it posits what if Superman killed the Justice League. And you mentioned feeling like it was a hate crime. I didn't necessarily make that connection. I'm not sure if all the characters were coded as minorities, but it was traumatic, and it's something where the first episode had a little bit of violence, but this was just on a whole nother level. And I think there is going to be a lot of conversation about the violence of the show in general. I think the season finale is even more violent than this first episode. But which is funny to me, it's the funny part to me is The Boys is a cartoon in so many ways. That's how it comes across to me, is that it's the cartoon levels of violence throughout and some of the exaggerated characters. This show feels much more earnest than The Boys does at times, and the violence, even though it's a cartoon, the violence of this show feels so much more visceral than it does on The Boys. And I can't help but compare it to The Boys because there are some clear similarities, and the fact that they both air on Amazon. So there are very clearly some similarities between these shows. It's certainly not a one for one either, but the violence of this show felt so much more visceral. And if I'm being honest, I think that this show in general, not saying that one is better than the other, but this show feels a lot more grounded, even though it's a cartoon, than The Boys does.
I'm kind of in the middle on that because like The Boys has this like not really a cartoon feel, like The Boys feels really grounded when it comes to the race stuff to me and like the social media stuff from season 2. That like season 2 for me and The Boys feels much more grounded than season 1 when it comes to that social media stuff with like I forget her name, um, Liberty or whatever, she was Liberty in the 70s, but I get that. But for me, like the violence in this show, it's not. I mean, it's not like so over the top for me. I'm used to seeing all this kind of like violent stuff and like anime and Tarantino movies and God knows what. But I think in the first episode it worked well. Like it was just enough. But I felt like in the finale it goes way too long. But I think that's just a Robert Kirkman thing. And I think here's where my Robert Kirkman criticism kind of comes in is that Robert Kirkman loves to torture, like not well, mentally and physically, but mainly physically torture his protagonist. Like you see that a lot in Walking Dead, and you see it here in Invincible clearly with Mark. And like the whole subway scene, I felt just went way beyond what was necessary for the story. You had already like he already established that like Omni Man does not care about humans. He's really here to take over the planet. And then when he takes Mark into that subway and forces Mark to like physically kill all those people on the subway train, it was just like okay, like it looked violently looked cool, but was that really really necessary? Like we get it already. It just is stretching it and stretching it, and that kind of goes in with my criticism of Robert Kirkman in terms of his writing, because like in Walking Dead, like it just goes on and on and on. And I read so many volumes, and then from what I read, it ended 2 years ago, and he just kind of came up with this ending because he didn't like he felt like he couldn't come up with 300. He wanted 300 issues, and he felt like he couldn't get there, so he just stopped at 192 or something. But like it just kept going on and on, and you see the show, it's like it goes on and on and on, and like you're again torturing your protagonist physically, and then having your villains just stay around for a while. So I don't know. It just kind of felt like the that was kind of an encompass of like my criticisms of Robert Kirkman. It was that scene at the subway in particular. Like it just goes on, and then the violence kind of goes so far to the fact where it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Because like Walking Dead has those moments too. Back when I stopped watching, like season 3 and 4, and then when I saw that the introduction of Negan and like he was the guy that killed Stephen Yeun's character in the comic or whatever, and I think he does in the show as well. So like I don't know. It's just something about Robert Kirkman maybe liking villains too much and then keeping them around too long and stretching things out too long. But as we mentioned, or Jerome mentioned to me off air, or before we start recording, that Invincible is done and there is an end point, and it shouldn't not be as long as Walking Dead, hopefully. But yeah, because he kind of shows that too. Because like at the end of the pot or episode 8, the finale, Omni Man just takes off and there's no real like resolution. He just kind of stops, and I was like, oh no, is this going to be the Robert Kirkman thing where he doesn't know how to end something and it just kind of keeps going and going and going? But hopefully not. Like that's kind of what. That's why I was kind of just done with Walking Dead after maybe season 4 it was or something like that. Because again, like more of the same with the villains torturing your protagonists and all that stuff, and it's a Robert Kirkman thing, and I'm just kind of like I think he just needs to do less and maybe keep I don't know because he likes that freedom thing, and I don't know. He also wrote Marvel Zombies. If you're familiar with Marvel Zombies, from what I've read, again, it's very much torturing your protagonist, like Spider-Man eating Mary Jane and Aunt May uncontrollably, shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I certainly think it can be problematic, and I certainly understand where you're coming from as far as torturing the heroes. And certainly, if this is something where Mark continues to be tortured next season, I think it's going to be an issue. But something that I did appreciate is that they're really building Mark up, and they're kind of having him start from the bottom. And you see him training a little bit with his father. And I think that the idea, the concept of the show is to show what it would be really like for somebody who's just starting as a superhero. The reality is that this is not easy. That he gets his ass kicked multiple times, and he is really struggling in his personal life. But I really appreciate the fact that they take the time to go into his personal life. And I think there are a lot of shows where I think a lot of the human characters feel like they have no agency. I think of the Marvel universe in particular has kind of done a poor job of giving non superhero people agency. But I look at Debbie Grayson, Mark's mother, and I know that you mentioned the fact that, of course, Mark Grayson is biracial because his mom is Asian and his father is white, so he's biracial. But the thing that I did like is that Sandra Oh, who is really great in her own right, Debbie Grayson is somebody who feels like she has a lot of agency, and even the I mean, like from a logical standpoint, Nolan Grayson could just snap her neck in like 2 seconds because we see him just decimate the Guardians in like it's a 3 minute scene and it's seven superhero people, but basically, even though he gets injured, it's really not that much of a contest. So, I mean, if he wanted to, he could snap her neck, but he doesn't. And I appreciate the fact that Debbie Grayson, in her own way, feels like a powerful character. And I also like the fact that she is intelligent. That, yes, her husband does gaslight her at points, but she remains vigilant, suspicious, and I like the fact that she basically finds out on her own, even before most of the other characters, that her husband is in fact the one who did this. So I really like that. I also we talk about agency. I really like what they did with Amber as well. I like the fact that Zazie Beetz. I mean, Zazie Beetz is great on her own, but I love the fact that this Amber Bennett character figures out that Invincible is a superhero, that Mark is a superhero before, again, before a lot of other people do. And I love the fact that like she's pissed at him for justifiable reasons and still breaks up with him in episode 6 towards the beginning of episode 7. I think it's not great how they come back together in episode 8, which I can get into shortly, but I appreciate again the fact that she is this independent person who again is thinking for herself and feels like a character and not just an impetus for the plot or a damsel in distress. Like they very easily could have done that with both Debbie and Amber, and they never do that. And that is something that I do value and appreciate. And yes, there is torture of Mark and of a lot of violence throughout, but I appreciate the fact that two of their strongest female characters are not used as fodder.
Yeah, and I gotta credit Jillian Jacobs too. I think she did a great job as Adam Eve. She's the other friend of Mark and part of like the Teen Titans group that ends up becoming the main group when the Guardians die. But I thought her story is really interesting too because like I felt like some of the side character stories were a lot more interesting and that I was really into, and like her story about not wanting like just to be on her own and just be her own hero and not taking orders and that kind of thing. I thought that was a really fascinating thing going on, and the stuff with her parents and like the fact that her dad is so like scared that something's going to happen to her, and like it's less about the family getting money or being famous. He's more concerned about her, and she's like 17 years old and now she moved out of the house and living in a tree and stuff like that. I thought she did a good job as Adam Eve, and I was really fascinated with that character. But then she kind of gets shortchanged to Mark's stuff at the end, and she doesn't really get like an arc towards the end. Like they were building an arc for her, but it felt like it didn't really come to fruition. So that was kind of disappointing. But I thought she did a really good job because like I really liked that character a lot. And there was like some jokes like they were even doing some like Christopher Reeve type jokes that I've criticized. Like, come on, it's clearly Clark Kent with glasses. You know what I mean? It's clearly Superman, and like the fact that she doesn't have any facial like changes between Adam Eve and her and Eve herself. I thought that was really funny, and the fact that like no one like her Amber didn't notice, and I was like, what? How do you not notice? Just shit like that, and the fact that like she mentions like if you're not looking for a superhero in public, you're not gonna see him, and I was like, yeah, that's a really good point. That might explain the whole criticism for me and me criticizing Clark Kent just putting on glasses, but. I did like that kind of like her character work and like the way that because Mark has a mask and he's so trying to hide it, but she's not, and people don't notice. So it's just crazy. But I thought that was really interesting stuff there. And then I thought Walton Goggins, man, I thought he picked it up in the last three episodes and just elevated that role. Because at the beginning, it was just the Nick Fury type character, kind of in the shadows, but he becomes really like emotionally invested towards the end, and like he's just like, and when Sandra Oh's character hears that, when she gets called a pet and she starts breaking down and he goes to console her, like you can tell from that moment that he does care and he's not just some government dude trying to control people. Like he's trying to figure out what's going on with Omni Man and what he really his true intentions and stuff like that. So he's playing that role very well. And then by the end, you can tell by his voice work that he's so much more emotionally invested post fight with Omni Man and Mark, that I think he's going to be such a key character in the second season, because I feel like now he's going to be that father figure for Mark, and he's probably going to be a better father figure than Omni Man. So I'm really looking forward to that for sure. I just want, well, I don't know, like the stuff with Robot was so great, and I love that episode with him, you know, um, getting a body. I thought that was great stuff, man, and I just want more of that. But it felt like it had nothing to do with the overall plot, what was going on, and that was really disappointing because like that story's so fascinating and great, but it had nothing to do with Mark and Omni Man. So I was just like, God, this is great storytelling. And then, but I don't know if it's really necessary. But I love the Robot character, and Robot for the first three episodes I thought was Billy Crudup, but it wasn't. It's Zachary Quinto with like a voice modulator. So I guess a voice modulated Zachary Quinto sounds like a real life Billy Crudup, because I thought it was listening to Billy Crudup. So there you go. But I love that Robot character, and I love the way that he gets his body. And then, credit to Jason, I can't pronounce his name, Rexplode, because basically what happens is he makes a clone of him, but in a younger body, right? And well, basically, Jason, if you've seen him before, Matsudakis or Mazokis or whatever, he's this
Manzukis. It's Jason Manzukis.
Manzukis. Okay, he's a really like out there comedian that's really loud and obnoxious, right? And he plays that really well. But when he plays the younger teenage version of himself, and he's supposed to sound like Robot, he does it so well. I was like, wow, you're actually acting, man. Like, good for you. You're not just being this wild man. You know what I mean? And I think I know you know what I'm talking about, because I think he was in. You ever watch The League?
I did. I think for me, Jason Manzukis is definitely someone that I like him in small doses. And sometimes when he was on the League, and even on the Good Place and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he gets to be too much. I think an animated show is almost perfect for him because then it's just the voice, and a cartoon is a cartoon anyway. So I almost appreciated the fact that we were just hearing him in this case, and I think for a show that really, again, it did feel more grounded and real. I think having Jason Manzukis in it kind of worked a little bit better, just because he was the only one that was going to a certain place, and his character itself, I think it really made a lot of sense for Jason Manzukis to be a part of this. So I think that he really worked out, and I think Jillian Jacobs did too. I think across the board. I mean, you really can't get a better cast than this, just on paper and what they were able to do. I mean, Mark Hamill is in the show, and he's in the show for probably a grand total of about 15 minutes, but I mean, he is as important of a role as so many other people, because he knows the Grayson family so intimately. He knows Debbie and Nolan and Mark so intimately, and I think that there was some drama about, like, did Nolan kill him at one point? And I love the fact that he's in the eighth episode, and he's pouring himself a glass, and Debbie asks for some, and he's like, "Well, this is my only glass." So I really like that, and I really like those moments, that those just very human moments, and I think that's what I like about the show, is that it allows the characters to breathe and to really give them a chance to feel like 3D people, and not just a means to an end. And certainly, I think when you have an 8 episode run, you're not going to get into everything. My hope is that in a second season that will not have the big mystery surrounding it around Nolan, and hopefully Nolan. My hope is that Omni Man is almost not there for a lot of the second season, so that they can kind of explore the rest of this universe a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. Because he was all over in the first season, and to kind of make him forget and then kind of show up at the end with like an army at the end of season two. That's kind of what I'm predicting. And I haven't read the comic, but that's the way it kind of plays out because the way they had this epilogue at the end of the season eight or season one, episode eight is like they showed what's next for Mark, and then they have like this highlight package of all the villains, right? So they kind of tie some things up there because like I don't know. I had some really questionable stuff with the villains because, like, there was this one villain I wanted to mention in particular. He's the one that beats up Mark in the Teen Titans or whatever in episode five, helping, well, secretly helping out Titan, but Battle Beast, and like he just annihilates all of them and then just disappears. Why didn't he just kill him? Like, I was confused about that because, like, I don't know. Like, if you were hired to kill these people and you just left them there to die and they all didn't die anyway, it just seemed really odd considering that he's this badass, right? So, and then he just disappears. Like, who is this guy? He's like a lion humanoid thing. That's like a, I don't know. He was like a Titan kind of god being, and he just comes in there and beats him up and leaves. It was just really weird, and I wanted some resolution of that, but I don't think we're ever gonna get that. So it's just one of those things. Like, there was some villain issues. Like, I didn't really like Ezra Miller's role. He was just a crazy scientist that kind of had no payoff other than the robots fighting Omni Man for 10 minutes or less than 10 minutes and then getting their asses handed to him. That was like the payoff to that. So I thought that was kind of a waste of time.
Well, I do think it's interesting in the montage you see that there's a whole room of them, and he is very clearly now working for the government. And how realistic is that? I mean, and I mean this sincerely. Like, this man, Ezra Miller's character, goes from being this really evil scientist who's experimenting on people, and the government just hires him. That seems very realistic. It's something like the government would do.
Yeah, that's so Artem Zola. So Artem Zola, it's going to backfire. But yeah, he was kind of a weird character. But the other character I really wanted to shout out, and I think I put this in the DM too, but the Batman S character named Darkwing, God, he was great, and they just wasted him. They wasted him. He was a badass Batman character, and like he's African American. It's a different take on it, but the fact that he's got a hoverboard, like fucking Marty, man. Oh my God, they wasted that. That was, ugh, that's a
See, I don't think they wasted it. I think it was a situation. I actually really appreciate the fact that they established the Guardians in the first episode. They actually do a much better job of this in the series than they do in the graphic novel to establish who these characters are a little bit and give them just enough background so that when Omni-Man just lays waste to them that it has some impact. So I give them a lot of credit for doing the work and putting some time in and even investing in some of the gimmicks and whatnot. So I appreciate it. I mean, if you look at the graphic novel and you look at the Darkwing character, it straight up is just Batman without the cowl.
I guess that's what I don't know. I think Batman on a hoverboard from Back to the Future 2, you got me. You got me, man. I don't know what. I guess that's just how much I love Back to the Future 2 when I'm marked out for a fucking hoverboard in a movie now. But it's 2021, so that's probably going to be more commonplace. But
I mean, clearly Darkwing is not as smart as Batman because if this were Batman, Batman would have had a plan in place to take care of Omni Man. Because as you know, Batman is always prepared to take out all the members of this Justice League, right? That's one of his gimmicks.
that's what I was thinking too. That's what I was thinking too. And I actually read some tweets about that too. Like I typed in Darkwing in Twitter, and the people said the same thing. Like he didn't have that backup plan that we saw in some of the cartoons. So that's very refreshing stuff. So overall, I think the characters are very well thought out. Some of them though, are just kind of like like I said, that Ezra Miller character. We'll see. We'll see. That was a little. I don't know, but yeah, and then that Battle Beast character better come back because that seems so random, and the fact that he didn't kill him just kind of was like, wow, you didn't do your job, and you just left them to live. So I don't know, but
I mean, he was in the montage, so my guess is that he is going to be around for season two. So that I'm excited for just what they're going to do with Mark because I clearly think that they are taking Omni Man off the board for most of, if not all of season two, so that they could focus on building Mark up as a character and more specifically as a superhero. I think that's really what season two is going to be about, and that's quite frankly what I think it should be about.
yeah, and then probably season three is going to be the whole Omni Man coming back, and probably with a whole army behind him because Yeah, by the end of it, it's clear that Omni-Man is a supremacist. He's like a psychopath. He's gaslighting people. Does not care about human life. It's very disturbing. But yeah, that's the point of it all.
Yeah, and I definitely want to touch on the eighth episode, but I also want to get into some of the other details of some of the episodes. So season one, episode two. One of the fascinating things about this episode is the extra dimensional aliens, the Flaxons, Brian. I want to talk about the Flaxons because we basically see them three different times, and it almost became like this running gag. Like the first time they come, they rapidly age and then they retreat. The second time they come back, they have anti-aging technology, but then Mark and the team they destroy them, so they have to retreat again. But then they come back for a third time, and then they bring Nolan back into their home world, and then we get a scene of Nolan just flat out destroying this entire world. And some of the facial expressions on the Flaxons also amused me. I was greatly amused by their presence in the second episode. Like they just kept getting defeated and kept coming back. It was really funny to me.
Yeah, that's my favorite episode because that's the Doctor Who type shit that I like. Like Doctor Who does that kind of stuff all the time, where it plays with time streams, aging, alien gags like that. That's what I think. That's why that's my favorite episode. And Robot was kind of leading the way, and he's doing like the whole Doctor Who of it all, and like computing and coming up with the time stream answers and stuff like that. I love that. That's my favorite episode. Like I want shit like that. Like I want more of the sci-fi stuff. I want them to lean more into the sci-fi stuff, hopefully. But like this was great because that's just smart writing, and it reminds me of an episode from like 4 years ago on Doctor Who, where there's this ship that he finds, and it's kind of like near a black hole or something like that, but it's on an angle. The ship's on an angle, like vertical, heading downward, right? So the people at the top of the ship are aging like far slower than the people at the bottom, and the people at the bottom of the ship that are closer to the black hole are aging super fast. So like it's totally two different time streams in the same ship. So that's what it reminded me of, and like God, that's smart sci-fi writing, and that's the kind of shit that I like. So I want more of that, hopefully. But it seems season two is going to be more Earth based, so we'll see when that happens. But if they're going to do more alien invasion stuff, I want more creative stuff like that for sure.
Also, in this episode, we get Mark skirmishing with Alan the alien, and Alan is not very good at his job because he is testing Earth's defenses for the coalition planets. I love the fact that Mark calls a timeout, and we find out his mission, and that he has confused Earth for another planet that is called Urath, I guess. And that is tremendously amusing to me. Their interactions in both the second and the eighth episode.
Yeah, he's going to be a recurring character for sure. He's going to be one of those people that kind of gives them the warning of what's to come in outer space. So that he's going to be that connection to the greater galaxy. It seems like so that's going to be, he's going to be that homing beacon of to what's coming probably at the end of season two, like I said.
So then in episode four, I want to talk about this because Mark gets sent to a mission to Mars, and this is also where there's a lot of gaslighting going on as Nolan and Debbie are in Rome rekindling their relationship. And while this is all going on, we get what goes on Mars, and basically it seems like Mars is going to be taken over by a group of aliens that are parasitic in nature, and I'm very intrigued to see where this goes because they're going to undoubtedly create some chaos, and there's got to be some twist involving them, and I'm assuming Omni Man. I'm assuming that's going to come forth at some point. I don't think this is quite going where you might think it's going as far as an alien invasion, but it's definitely something that's going to come back. And I was tremendously amused by the way they built this up, and then the way the episode ended with them basically taking over.
Yeah, I hope it's not going to be some comic relief stuff in the second season, and they're going to be like comic relief aliens, because that's what it kind of felt like they were doing by the end. Because like even the Mars King or whatever kind of had some jokes. It felt like it's like a comedic tone, but I don't know because the way it seems is like one of the astronauts got replaced, right? And then the one on Earth is not the same astronaut that's stuck on Mars. So there's like a random copy Martian on Earth still, I guess. there's a lot of weird stuff going on in that episode and a lot of details that were kind of glossed over. But that's some of the sci-fi stuff that I do like, and I guess they could treat it for comedy, but hopefully not, because it does seem like there's going to be a whole episode in season two about that, and like a whole thing with a callback and all the little details that you kind of missed in this. But it was good because like it's one of these episodes you plant seeds for. So
And then as you get into the rest of the episodes, I think where the show starts to put a lot of its energy is into building the team and into building out this world. I think episode 5 is probably my favorite, just because there are so many there's so many decisions that get made that pay off in kind of negative ways for Mark. But I kind of love the fact that the new Guardians, they get brutalized, and I know that you don't like some of the torture stuff, and I certainly see where you're coming from with that. But the thing that I appreciate so much is there is a willingness to certainly put these characters through the ringer. And if you don't know who the creator is and kind of some of the other things that he's done, I think you might almost appreciate this a little bit more. But I love the fact that Mark is willing to align himself with a villain, and it proves to be kind of a bad decision. And ultimately, Titan is able to take over the operation. So I really like what they did in episode 5, and it was probably my favorite of the season for that reason. And I also love the fact that we get to know Amber and Eve, and they get to build their relationship a little bit. We learn a little bit about who Black Samson is as a character, somebody who was a superhero, loses his powers, but then regains them in the next episode, in episode 6. But I love that he is kind of both a mentor to the Guardians, but he is also very clearly trying to, stay relevant as a hero. And that is something that I appreciate. And it feels like episode 5 is the only episode, again, to really directly to deal with some of the racial connotations because of what Titan is doing and why he's doing it for his family and Breaking Bad. And basically, I mean, it kind of feels like the end of Luke Cage season 2 when Luke Cage becomes the big bad boss. So that's kind of how I felt as I was watching the end of this episode, where Titan becomes the big man in charge.
yeah, it's weird because I never even considered him a villain at all. Like I think the way he rationalized it, I was like, yeah, he's not a villain. He just got caught up owing money to some gangsters, right? But they ended up taking over. So he did the whole Scarface gimmick. But I still don't consider him a villain. But that's just maybe me. I don't know because I feel like I think he's like aiming the violence towards the people who are really the criminals and the violent people. But we'll see because I don't know. I don't know if he knew that the Battle Beast was gonna fuck them up so bad. Because it felt like he really like has a sincere apology to marketing. Like, man, my bad. I didn't know it was gonna be like that. I didn't know, but thank you. So, but I do appreciate that, and yeah, it was one of the few that touched on race and class and stuff. So I at least did that. But I was happy for the mom or um, his daughter and his wife at the end when they go up to the penthouse. So I thought, maybe he's not a villain. So we'll see.
And I think that when you get to the eighth episode, it's almost like two very different halves. The first half, which is what amuses me about the first half is that you have this character Omni Man, who is one of the few superheroes in this universe to wear a cape. And he is doing a lot of monologuing, Brian. I think you know where I'm going with this. Who would have thought that in 2021 we could have a caped quote unquote superhero still monologuing?
Yeah, it's Incredibles all over again. But I don't know. History repeats itself, I guess.
But this, I mean, to me, this is why you bring in J.K. Simmons. This is why you bring someone of his stature to do this show, is because of the dialogue that you are spewing out in episode 8, which could sound absurd and sound ridiculous because of just who he is. He is a supremacist. He is trying to take over. I mean, he's a fascist in so many ways. And I really love the execution of this episode for so many reasons. What I think works about it is the violence because it is so visceral. I think the dialogue that's going back. I really like that in episode 7, they have this incident where Immortal is brought back by the twins, and he doesn't injure Omni Man, but he turns Omni Man's eyes blood red, And that was a really great decision on their part because just visually, the story that it told, it made him come off even more unhinged and crazy and insane. And Mark is so clearly shell shocked by, what his father does to Immortal, and then they're having this conversation. And I really love the fact that even amidst so much of the tragedy that is going on in Chicago and what they're trying to do, that Mark is still trying to save people. I think that's something that was really powerful because I think Mark is kind of a shitty person at times in the first 7 episodes, especially with the way that he treats Amber and justifiably gets broken up. But I love in the 8th episode, even though his efforts are a lot of times for naught, the fact that he is trying to save people amidst the chaos and obviously dealing with the trauma of what his father is telling him. I really like the fact that there are two separate incidents of him really going out of his way to save people or trying to save people. I'm thinking of the pilot and what happens there. Like, they take a good 45 seconds, and even though he gets his head like smashed in just like a second later, it speaks a lot to what they're doing with the Mark character, that they show him doing this to differentiate him from his father.
Yeah, that's clear as day. Like he's because you can tell like in the earlier episodes, sometimes Omni Man doesn't want to save people. He feels like, that's the government's job. You know what I mean? And then his wife has to like encourage him. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So it's clear like there's a big difference between the two. Because I mean, obviously Mark's human, despite the fact that he's the son of an alien, but he's human, and his dad's not. And despite the fact that even in flashback form, and they try to humanize him when he's at the watching Mark play baseball as a kid. Um, Still, like he's not a human at all. He doesn't have, at least he pretended to be human, but it's clear as day. Like he is not a human at all, and he has no human qualities. He's a son of a bitch, psychopath, and yeah, and Mark is like the clear contrast of that because he grew up on Earth, and that's kind of the point of it all. So I get that, and that's clear that it was just brutal seeing like him holding that woman, and then only thing that was left was the arm. That was just, oh my God! But yeah, that was intentional, and it's purposeful. But hopefully, he rises from this, and hopefully he's not getting his ass kicked so much in the next season, because like it feels like by the end of this, he doesn't. I don't know if he's strong enough to do it, but hopefully he will be, because again, with all the stuff that he's going through, girlfriend issues, home issues, obviously now, and just trying to save everyone in general, and being the number one go to now superhero because, Omni Man left and turned bad. Like, there's a lot of pressure on him. So, is he going to break from the pressure? I don't know. But that's going to be the big question mark.
Yeah, and something else that I really liked. So there's this brutal fight, and what happens to Mark is just vicious, and the torture scene, as Brian has alluded to. But there is this moment when it seemingly looks like Nolan is about to basically finish off his son, and they make the decision to go to a flashback and go back to a moment when things were simpler, happier perhaps, and Debbie is basically showing her husband like what humanity is and why it's so significant and important to embrace what it means to be a human person. And it's very powerful to me to have that flashback. And I think flashbacks can very often be overused by TV shows, and starting with these openings where they'll have something and then they'll say like 24 hours early or something. Like, that stuff has just gotten really annoying. And but I think to have that like 2 or 3 minutes to cut back to what Mark's face looks like currently with all of his teeth knocked out, and then in that moment for Nolan to fly away to who knows where. I mean, I think that is also an emotional moment that sticks with me. And I mean, it doesn't justify anything that Omni Man is doing. He is very clearly still a villain, but I love that even though he is a villain, there's still a human element there, and he couldn't do probably what he was going to do in that moment. And that is also something that I appreciate. And again, I think it also again reiterates that Debbie is so much a centerpiece of this story. And there's a moment later on in the episode when they come home and they're talking about ordering dinner, and Debbie is just bawling in her bedroom. Like she is putting on this face and she is trying to be this very strong person, but like in that moment it's just an emotional collapse. And if there's one thing I think the last 14 months have taught us, it's that those kinds of things can happen. And again, I love the fact that this show is willing to have those emotional moments in such a viscerally violent, what could be like a cartoonishly violent at times, but they are really grounding the show and making you feel the emotions of the characters.
Definitely, that was one of those images that it reminds me of my mom. You know what I mean? Like when going through the divorce, single mom, trying to hold everything together. Yeah, that hit home too for sure. So I got that. I just hope that next time they kind of go into more of the racial stuff though. But that's just we'll see because like they kind of touched on it here. But there are stories to tell in terms of like a biracial family that they really didn't go into that I was kind of questioning. So we'll see. Maybe there's just the lack of experience or the lack of knowledge in terms of that. But I don't know. You set that up and it kind of went away with that. So that was kind of disappointing for me. But yeah, I think Omni Man, um, despite that moment, man, I still think, I don't know. I don't even know how they're going to kill him. If they do kill him, knowing knowing Robert Kirkman, he may just live throughout it all. But who knows? But I'm looking forward to season two. I just hope that it doesn't fall into the whole Walking Dead thing where it kind of goes on and on and on, and we're gonna torture Mark some more. Hopefully, he's standing up for himself and like kicking ass in the second season, and kind of getting even with some of these people like Battle Beast, and maybe go bring him through the ringer, kind of thing.
Yeah, I certainly hope that season two is an evolution of his character and that he gets built up. I mean, I think this is what you want to do in professional wrestling terms. Like you're building the baby face up for the big heel at the end, right? Like that's the goal. And I think that's something we're going to see in season two. And I'm very excited to see where this goes. And I'm glad that seasons two and three are both coming. So I'm hopeful that we will see these seasons soon. And yeah, that's really it. There's certainly other aspects we could cover, but we've hit on a lot of the major points. I think if I were to give this a grade, I definitely enjoyed this significantly more than Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This to me is probably about from a quality standpoint. I think this is right about where I feel about WandaVision. Maybe even a little bit higher. I would say like a B plus, maybe A minus range for me.
I've been going out of 10, so I would say 7.5, borderline 8. I might go back and watch a few episodes, like episode 2 again, because I really enjoyed the whole narrative of that. But yeah, a lot of more positives and negatives, and you've heard some of my critiques. But hopefully they kind of look into that, and hopefully they don't treat their gay characters like turning them to monsters in the second season. But I did like that at least his best friend kind of at least kept some face, even though his boyfriend got turned into a fucking monster. But at least they kept that up, and he's not dead. Thank God.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty terrible if they did that. I can't imagine a scenario where they do that. But yeah, I'm certainly hoping that they are more respectful of William and that they give him some agency beyond being the best friend. And yeah, I'm very excited. So Brian, we are going to be reviewing a movie that we've been putting off. It's one of our last superhero movies to review. We are going to be talking about Sean Connery's last movie, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which has a pretty infamous reputation. And we are going to get into why it's so infamous next week. But that is what we have to look forward to, Brian. And I know that you've seen it before. I've seen it before. And we're going to be covering Sean Connery's last movie.
And I think it kind of exemplifies my feelings on Sean Connery as a whole. Like, despite him being in shitty movies, like I have seen Highlander 2, and I regret Highlander 2, but goddamn, he's such a class act in that movie, and he's just trying to like be a professional, be a gentleman, and he's had some really controversial statements before about women and stuff like that. That's just like from a dated past, but he's stuff about smacking women and stuff like that. But if you go beyond that, he's learned from it. It felt like, and it's gonna be fun talking about Sean Connery because I don't think we've ever had a chance to talk about Sean Connery on our podcast too much, if any at all. So I'm really looking forward to it. I love Highlander. So yeah, this is going to be a fun throwback because at the time I really didn't think nothing of this. I wasn't even aware of like Alan Moore at the time or whatever. And post, I was just like, oh, that was a fun movie. And then I read the comic, or at least volume one, 3 years later, and it is completely different. And now I know why people were pissed.
And then in 2 weeks, we are going to be looking at Jupiter's Legacy, a Netflix show. It's going to be out on May the 7th, but we're going to give ourselves a little bit of extra time. It would be a very fast turnaround to try to cover that show and then record an episode before our Tuesday release date. So that is going to be in 2 weeks, and then our finale before we go on a summer break, Brian. We're going to be doing something a little bit different. We are going to look back, and we are going to decide Brian and I's 10 favorite superhero movie performances ever. And Brian and I are not telling each other the lists. You might have some idea what we're going to go with, but that is something that I'm looking forward to as our big finale.
And just to clarify the rule, it's one performance per movie, right?
Yep, it is one performance for a movie, not body of work.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting. I have some stuff in mind, and it's going to be. I'm going to have to look back and look through all the catalog and kind of remember. But it's some of the obvious stuff that would stand out. But I'll try to pick out some surprises too that kind of tickled my fancy. You know what I mean? Because we all have our different our appreciations of different types of performances. We'll see. You never know. Nicolas Cage might show up on here.
That's going to be very exciting. All right. So for Brian, my name is Jerome Cuson. Again, thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
So Alan the alien, he's dyslexic, right?